And we take another breath. With each breath, we just become a little bit more present. I heard something very appropriate recently. That in the moment we can handle anything. It's our fear of the future that overwhelms us. But in the present moment, there's nothing that we cannot handle. So in this moment, we allow ourselves to be right here, present.
Right.
We can't heal what we don't feel. We come here to do the most sacred work. To cleanse, to purify, to consecrate, to recalibrate, to rejuvenate, to revitalize. We come here to consciously choose to align with the divine, to birth the beloved community, allowing anything and everything that stands in its way to simply be melted through the light and the heat of love. One planet, one people, one power. Create in us a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within us, so that we are kinder, more gracious, more holistic, more inclusive, more embracing. Your love is redemptive, and we bask in it. Thank you for this extraordinary opportunity to come together as spiritual community. We bless this time together, knowing that we are uplifted and sustained. It is good. Yes. It is really, really good. We just get out of the way. We allow it to be. And so it is. So it is. So how's everybody doing today?
Great.
Good?
Good.
All right. So let's do a couple of expressions of gratitude. Gratitude for this exquisite moment, for being here at such a time as this. Anybody have a gratitude that you'd like to share?
Oh, sure.
Okay, give us your name and share.
I'm Major. No, I was just thinking right when you said, like, we have this moment, right? And that's really, I've been applying that lately, just being in the moment. And it's really interesting how things just flow so much better when we do that. So I guess my gratitude is for that awareness and being able to put it into practice and actually experiencing like all this stuff that I've been listening to for almost 50 years now. You kind of ignoring finally getting it. So yeah, so gratitude for the moment for sure.
Good. Good, good, good. Anybody else? A gratitude.
So I'm grateful because our book group just on Sunday finished Waking Up Light. It was a wonderful experience.
Good,
wonderful. Good. And she had a habit every once in a while of just saying in 4 or 5 words, she just nailed it. And the two that really got to me are racism is caused by white people and blamed on people of color. And I thought, oh man, that is the truth of the matter. And the other one is the white experience isn't everybody's experience. And white experience seems so normal, we don't even know it's a white experience. And when we know that ours is a white experience that isn't typical for everybody, it's a huge, but again, it's simple and easy to understand. And she is a very brave woman to write this book.
Very good. All right, I got to read this book.
It's wonderful, Rev Deborah.
Yeah. Do you want to say something, Mom?
I am just grateful that I am understanding more and more of just like what the Major said, of what I've always known. And it's just gelling so much. I'm so strong in it now.
Good. Good, good, good.
I'll share this with you later. This is the prayer I was telling you.
Oh, all
It's
right.
called the Shema of the New Age.
It sounds like a good thing to end on.
Okay, good.
Beautiful. A good closing for us.
It is perfect for anything, morning, beginning or end.
Ha! Yes, indeed.
All right, Rev.
Well, you know, you're so hitting on something, Kaylee. This idea, we sometimes, well, the official name for it in diversity is ethnocentrism. Ethnocentric, where you take your ethnicity, you take your perspective, and then you project it out upon the whole world so that your experience becomes normative, that your experience becomes against what everything else is judged. And this is part of the root of supremacy. Okay. Every time you do it, you're not necessarily in supremacist consciousness, but it really is steeped in this. But in order to keep it, it means that you have to completely obliterate, disavow, disallow the reality of any other experience that's contrary. It simply cannot exist if it contradicts like the dominant one. And we just keep doing this over and over and over again, whether it's the projection of the US version of evangelical experience. Remember several months ago when we took a look at that work from Deborah Filk, where she was showing that around the world, evangelicals were for looking at climate change. You know, they were for all kinds of equalities and rights and things that we take here as controversial. It's like, no, but of course, this is what we're going to do. Of course, torture is bad. You know, of course, you're going to have, equality in these kinds of things. But we project that experience out and make it seem like it's everybody. Our nation is very ethnocentric as Americans. You know, if you were to do a representative population of the world and you put 100 people in the room, 95 of them would not be American. If you put 100 people in the room, represented to the world, 95 would not be American. And yet we project those little 5 people and their worldview onto everybody. And it's the same thing that just keeps happening over and over and over again. And what does it take, really? What it takes is a willingness to understand that there is a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. That there's a whole, and that we're just part of a whole. We're not the end all, be all, do all, but we're just part of it. And this notion that you just said, Kaylee, about racism, this is true for everything. It's this revisionist history where wherever there's a problem and you're on the triangle with it, there's a way in which the problem gets projected as being the fault of the ones who are the most negatively impacted by it. So like homelessness is the fault of people who don't have homes. You know, rape is the fault of women. You know, poverty is the fault, of people who are impoverished. Rather than looking at what are the systems and what are the things that are causing this in the first place, because it makes you exempt from having to do anything about it. And then more insidious about it is that not only does it rewrite history so that the people who are the most negatively impacted are at fault, the ones who really are the perpetrators get to perceive themselves as the victims.
Yes, yes.
We're the victims. We caused this, but that's not what we see. What we see is that you're causing a problem for us. It's this complete rewriting of it. So it takes a certain kind of bold and daring to get out of the shame and the blame game, to really acknowledge the fact that other people's experiences are not the same as our experiences. And then what does that say? There is a wonderful, wonderful diversity training video called The Color of Fear. It's dated a little bit now, it's probably a good 20 years old, but it's a classic. Even Oprah had it on her show. It was produced by Lee Moon Hwa of Stir Fry Productions in San Francisco. It's an encounter group with 8 men, 2 Latinos, 2 Asian men, 2 African American men, and 2 American white males. Not too far out from the San Francisco area. And it's a weekend encounter group with them about race. And it's just wonderful because they enact all of the things that go on and happen that you can't see behind scenes. And it's the intraracial stuff as well as the interracial stuff. And you get a chance to see the real dynamics. But there's this pivot moment. There's this absolute pivot moment when one of the African American guys is just exploding at a white guy who will not get it. He just refuses to get it. And there's this poignant moment when Lee Moon Hwa, who's a psychologist, and he was the facilitator, asks the guy, his name is David, what if the things that he was hearing were actually true? Like, just for a moment, what would it mean if any of that were true? And at that point, David just broke into tears. He just started crying. And he said, then the world wouldn't be what I thought it was. It would mean that the world is not as fair as I thought that it was. But it took that break. And once he got there, then people were saying, now I can work with you. And then you could watch his transformation from there. But it took the willingness on his part to have his bubble broken. To have the bubble broken. So what I would like to do today is share something that's going pretty viral. I sent some links to this last week when it was pretty hot and fresh. It is a speech that was given very, very recently by Mitchell Landrieu, who is the current mayor of New Orleans. He used to be the lieutenant governor. I believe his sister now is in the Senate. He's a son of the South. He's born and raised in New Orleans, and he comes from a very long, prestigious civil rights family. He's a white guy. And he took down the last 4 monuments to the Confederacy in New Orleans recently. And this is his speech about why he did it. Now, I sent a link to this, as I said a moment ago, but when I looked at the link, I was pretty frustrated because a certain section of his speech, which was the most poignant, and as far as I'm concerned, the most critical, was missing. And missing in the transcript, written transcripts as well. And I was really frustrated. And I looked at video after video after video, and they were all the same. But I know what I saw. I know that I saw it in that speech because I thought, oh my God, somebody went there and named it And I went and I researched the historical data, which I had already known, but that corroborated everything he was saying. And just this morning, I found it. Like, I went back to all the different versions that I had looked at. It's only about 90 seconds that got edited out, but that 90 seconds is where the rubber hits the road. And I resent it. I just resent it now to the same people. It's these 90 seconds where he actually quotes some of the founding documents of the Confederacy, of what was its purpose for getting started and why. And without it, we just keep sort of doing this finger pointing, red versus blue. Without these 90 seconds and without looking at the documents that I'm about to show you, there's no proof. People can say, oh, well, this was racist or this is based on slavery, but it feels like that's just conjecture, or like that's just your narrative, that's just your story or your version, but that's not really what it's about. So we're going to take a breath, okay? We're going to take a breath. This is going to be as deep as it was with some of the original stuff that we were doing. And I'm not going to overload you today, but we're going to connect this next week with the materials that we were going over before from the Constitution and the Dred Scott decision to really see this pattern of where we are today. We're looking at this not to try to dig up old history. We're looking at this today to see where our consciousness is. My contention has been and continues to be in this series for such a time as this, is that there is healing that needs to be done. There are certain concepts and ideas that have never been put to rest. We have just moved on. We've swept it under the rug. We have sanitized. We have homogenized and pasteurized. We have done all of these other things except look at it and heal. Okay. So, are there people who are online?
No, I'm just
telling them?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So these extra minutes, and to see, and I haven't found any place where it's the whole thing, because even prior to this, there are a few extra minutes which are really sweet, where he starts off just getting on the stage, where he's acknowledging his wife of 30 years and, you know, other people in the room, and it just kind of sets this warm stage for who he is and really shows his courage for where he's about to step into. Mind you, as you look at the interviews, as you look at these, as you look at the interviews afterwards, it's like most things where you never know what's going to happen. Okay, when you're in it, you don't know that it's a great moment in history. You know, when you're in it, you know, how could anybody know in Montgomery that Rosa Parks bus boycott was going to be what it was? You know, who knew marching on Selma? It's like, you don't know. So he thinks he's giving a speech to New Orleans. Now he recognizes this is going to have like rippling effects in the South for sure, which it is and which it has. He has stirred up the hornet's nest. But even he didn't realize how viral this is going to be. And when I first sent this out, I said, he's looking very presidential. I'm going to watch his career. And I'm not surprised. We're all over the news now. There's all this talk about, you know, perhaps getting him groomed to be on the ticket. He certainly has the pedigree Let's put it that way. And the experience, having been a lieutenant governor, as well as a mayor, and seems to be really, really, really sharp. And I haven't seen leadership like this, honestly. In my whole entire life, I have never seen leadership like this. And all I can say is we all need to continue to pray for his safety. Yes.
When you're talking about it,
I'm saying is that I sent you a link, and it was only afterwards that I discovered that 90 seconds was edited out. So I've sent you a new link that has it in it. And what happens is that news feeds just keep picking up each other. So what's going viral now is missing the 90 seconds. But it's these 90 seconds where he talks about the origins of the Confederacy. And he even uses the language, I'm going to take your hands and peel off like the grip that you have had on a certain story that isn't true. Yeah, he's very conscious of it. You know, this is a really warm day. Can we open that other window there too? We've closed the blinds, but to keep the windows open. So Barbara, can you hear us okay, Dot? Okay, good. If you can just raise some windows. You can leave the shades, but it is a warm day. Yeah, that one's a little weird. Why don't you try the other one near the door? Russell, where you are. And I'm warning you now, okay? Some of you have already seen it, but I'm warning you now. It's gonna be a little tough. And then when we're through with this and you have a chance to breathe, we're going to take a look at the actual document that he's referencing. Okay, it's actually called the Cornerstone Speech. Yes, because that's what it was. It was the equivalent to the beginning of their Constitution. Okay, so I'm going to, once this gets going, I'm going to sneak out for a couple of minutes and actually print out the Cornerstone Speech so you can have it in your hand, you know, and take it with you. I gave you the link, but we'll be looking at it on the screen, and sometimes you can't always see as well on the screen, but I want you to have it. You ready? Okay, yes. 90 seconds. So let's take it from the beginning and fill up the screen.
The soul of our beloved city is rooted in a history that has evolved over thousands of years, rooted in a diverse people who've been here together every step of the way, through good and through bad. It is a history, our history, that holds in its heart the stories of Native Americans, the Choctaw, the Houma, the Chitimacha, Hernando de Soto, Robert Cavalier, Sir de La Salle, the Acadians, the Aslinos, the enslaved people of Senegambia, free people of color, the Haitians, the Germans, both empires of France and Spain, the Italian, the Irish, the Cubans, the South and Central Americans, the Vietnamese, and so many more. You see, New Orleans is truly a city of many nations, a melting pot, a bubbling cauldron of many cultures. There is no other place quite like it in the world that so eloquently exemplifies the uniquely American motto, E pluribus unum, out of many we are one. But there are also other truths about our city that we must confront. New Orleans was one of America's largest slave markets, a point where hundreds of thousands of souls were bought, sold, and shipped up the Mississippi River to lives of forced labor, of misery, of rape and of torture. America was a place where nearly 4,000 of our fellow American citizens were lynched, 540 in Louisiana alone, where our courts enshrined separate but equal, where freedom riders were beaten to a bloody pulp. So when people say to me that the monuments in question are history, well, what I just described to you is our history as well. And it is a searing truth. And it immediately begs the question, why there are no slave ship monuments, no prominent markers on public land to remember the lynchings or the slave blocks, nothing to remember this long chapter of our lives of pain, of sacrifice, of shame, all of it happening on the soil of New Orleans. So for those self-appointed defenders of history and the monuments, they are eerily silent on what amounts to historical malfeasance, a lie by omission. There is a difference, you see, between remembrance of history and the reverence of it. For America, New Orleans, it has been a long and winding road, marked by tragedy and triumph, but we cannot be afraid of the truth. As President George W. Bush said at the dedication ceremony for the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and I quote, "A great nation does not hide its history. It faces its flaws and it corrects them." So today I want to speak about why we chose to remove these 4 monuments to the lost cause of the Confederacy, but also how and why this process can move us towards healing and understanding each other. So let's start with the facts. The historic record is clear. Robert E. Lee, Jeff Davis, PGT Beauregard statues were not erected to just honor these men, but as part of a movement which became known as the cult of the lost cause. This cult had one goal and one goal only: through monuments and through other means to rewrite history, to hide the truth, which is that the Confederacy was on the wrong side of humanity. First erected 166 years after the founding of our cities, 19 years after the Civil War, these monuments that we took down were meant to rebrand the history of our city and the ideals of the Confederacy. It is self-evident that these men did not fight for the United States of America. They fought against it. They may have been warriors, but in this cause, they were not patriots. These statues are not just stone and metal. They're not just innocent remembrances of a benign history. These monuments celebrate a fictional, sanitized Confederacy, ignoring the death, ignoring the enslavement, ignoring the terror that it actually stood for. And after the Civil War, these monuments were part of that terrorism, as much as burning a cross on someone's lawn. They were erected purposefully to send a strong message to all who walked in the shadows about who was still in charge in this city.
Here it comes.
Now, should you have goals of the Confederacy, in the very weeks before the war broke out, the Vice President of the Confederacy, Alexander Stephens, made it very clear: ignoring the death, ignoring the enslavement, ignoring the terror that it actually stood for. And after the Civil War, these monuments were part of that terrorism, as much as burning a cross on someone's lawn. They were erected purposefully to send a strong message to all who walked in the shadows about who was still in charge in this city. Now, should you have goals of the Confederacy, in the very weeks before the war broke out, the Vice President of the Confederacy, Alexander Stephens, made it very clear that the Confederate cause was about maintaining slavery and white supremacy. In his now famous cornerstone speech, he said that the Confederacy's cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to a superior race, is his natural and his normal condition. This, our new government, he said, is the first in the history of the world based upon this great physical, philosophical, and moral truth. Now, with these shocking words still ringing in your ears, I want to try to gently peel your hands from the grip on this false narrative of our history that I think weakens us, and make straight a wrong turn that we made many years ago, so we can more closely connect with the integrity to the founding principles of our nation and forge a clearer, straighter path towards a better city and towards a more perfect union. Now, last year, President Obama echoed these sentiments about the need to contextualize and to remember all of our history. He recalled a single piece of stone, a slave auction block engraved with a marker commemorating a single moment in 1830 when Andrew Jackson and Henry Clay stood and spoke from it. President Obama said, "Consider what this artifact tells us about history. On a stone where day after day, for years, men and women bound and bought, sold and bid like cattle on a stone, worn down by the tragedy of over 1,000 bare feet. And for a long time, the only thing we considered important, the singular thing we chose to commemorate as history, with a plaque, were the unmemorable speeches of these two powerful men. A piece of stone, one stone, both stories history, one story told, one story forgotten, or maybe even purposefully ignored." Now, as clear as it is for me today, for a long time, even though I grew up in one of New Orleans' most diverse neighborhoods, even with my family's proud history of fighting for civil rights, I must have passed by these monuments thousands of times without giving them a second thought. So I'm not judging anybody. I'm not judging people. We all take our own journey on race. I just hope people listen like I did when my dear friend Wynton Marsalis helped me see the truth. He asked me to think about all the people who have left New Orleans because of our exclusionary attitudes. Another friend asked me to consider these four monuments from the perspective of an African-American mother or father trying to explain to their fifth grade daughter why Robert E. Lee sat atop of our city. Can you do it? Can you do it? Can you look into the eyes of this young girl and convince her that Robert E. Lee is there to encourage her? Do you think that she feels inspired and hopeful by that story? Do these monuments help her see her future with limitless potential? Have you ever thought that if her potential is limited, yours and my potential, my limited potential as well? We all know the answers to these very simple questions. When you look into this child's eyes is the moment when the searing truth comes into focus. This is the moment when we know what we must do, when we know what is right. We cannot walk away from this truth. Now, I knew that taking down these monuments was going to be tough, but you elected me to do the right thing, not the easy thing. And this is what that looks like. So relocating these monuments is not about taking something away from someone else. This is not about politics. It's not about blame. It's not about retaliation. This is not about a naive quest to solve all of our problems at once. This is, however, about showing the whole world that we as a city, that we as a people are able to acknowledge, to understand, to reconcile, and more importantly, choose a better future for ourselves, making straight what has been crooked and making right what was wrong. Otherwise, we will continue to pay a price with discord, with division, and violence. To literally put the Confederacy on a pedestal in our more prominent places, in honor is an inaccurate recitation of our full past, is an affront to our present, and it is a bad prescription for our future. History cannot be changed. It cannot be moved like a statue. What's done is done. The Civil War is over. The Confederacy lost. And we're better for it. Surely we are far enough removed from this dark time to acknowledge that the cause of the Confederacy was wrong. And in the second decade of the 21st century, asking African Americans, or anyone else for that matter, to drive by property that they own, occupied by reverential statues of men who fought to destroy the country and deny that person's humanity, seems perverse. It seems absurd. Century-old wounds are still raw because, you see, they never healed right in the first place. So here is the essential truth. We are better together than we are apart. Indivisibility is our essence. Isn't this the gift that we, the people of New Orleans, have given to the world? We radiate beauty and grace in our food, in our music, in our architecture, in our joy of life, in our celebration of death, in everything that we do. We gave the world this funky thing called jazz. It is the most uniquely American art form that has developed across the ages and from different cultures. Think about second lines. Think about Mardi Gras. Think about Mufalada. Think about the Saints. Think about gumbo. Think about red beans and rice. My God, just think. All we hold dear is created by throwing everything in the pot, creating, producing something better. Everything a product of our historic diversity. We are proof that out of many, we are one and better for it. Out of many, we are one, and we really do love it. And yet, we still find so many excuses to not do the right thing. President Bush's words, once again, a great nation does not hide its history. It faces its flaws and corrects them. We forget, we deny how much we really depend on each other, how much we really need each other. We justify our silence and inaction by manufacturing noble causes that marinate in historic denial. We still find a way to say, wait, not so fast. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, wait has almost always meant never. We cannot wait any longer. We need to change. And we need to change now. No more waiting. This is not just about statutes. This is about attitudes. And it's about behaviors as well. If we take down these statutes and don't change to become a more open and inclusive society, then all of this would have been in vain. While some have driven by these statutes every day and either revered their beauty or failed to see them at all, many of our neighbors and our fellow Americans see them very, very clearly. Many are painfully aware of the long shadows their presence casts, not only literally, but figuratively. And they clearly receive the message that the Confederacy and the cult of the lost cause was intended to deliver. Earlier this week, as the cult of the lost cause statue, P.T.P. Beauregard came down, world-renowned musician Terrence Blanchard, who's with us, stood watch with his wife Robin and their two beautiful daughters at their side. You see, Terrence went to school on the edge of City Park, at a school named after one of America's great heroes and patriots, John F. Kennedy. But to get there, he had to pass by the monument to a man who fought to deny his humanity. And he said, quote, I've never looked at them as a source of pride. It always made me feel as if they were put there by people who don't respect us. This is something I never thought I'd see in my lifetime. It's a sign that the world is changing. Yes, Terrence, it is. And it is long overdue. Now is the time to send a new message to the next generation of New Orleanians. A message about the future, about the next 300 years and beyond. Let us not miss this opportunity in New Orleans, and let us help the rest of America do the same, because now is the time for choosing. Now is the time to actually make this city the city we should have always been had we gotten it right the first time. place to stop for a moment and ask ourselves, at this point in our history, after Katrina, after Rita, after Ike, after Gustav, after the national recession, after the BP oil spill catastrophe, after the tornado, if presented with an opportunity to build monuments that told our story or curate these particular spaces, would these be the monuments that we want the world to see? Is this really our story? You see, we have not erased history. We're becoming part of the city's history by writing the long image these monuments represent and crafting a better, more complete future for all of our children and for future generations. And unlike when these Confederate monuments were erected as symbols of white supremacy, we now have a chance to create not only new symbols, but to do it together as one people. In our blessed land, we come to the table of democracy as equals. We have to reaffirm our commitment to a future where each citizen is guaranteed the uniquely American gifts of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is what really makes America great. And today it's more important than ever to hold fast to these values and together say a self-evident truth that out of many, we are one. That is why we reclaim these spaces for the United States of America, because we are one nation, not two, indivisible with liberty and justice for all, not some. We are all part of one nation and pledge allegiance to one flag, the flag of the United States of America. And here's the kicker. New Orleanians are in it all of the way. It is in this union, it is in this truth that real patriotism is rooted and it flourishes. Instead of revering a 4-year brief historical aberration that was called the Confederacy, we can celebrate all 300 years of our rich, diverse history as a place named New Orleans and set the tone for the next 300 years. After decades of public debate, of anger, of anxiety, of anticipation, of humiliation, and of frustration, after public hearings and approvals from 3 separate community boards and commissions, after 2 robust public hearings and a 6-1 vote by our duly elected city council, after review by 13 different federal and state judges, the full weight of the legislative, executive, and judicial branches of government has been brought to bear, and that is why these monuments are coming down in accordance with the law and will be removed. So now is the time to come together, to heal, and to focus on our larger task. Not only building new symbols, but making this city a beautiful manifestation of what is possible and what we as a people can become. And so let us remember the once exiled, imprisoned, and universally loved now Nelson Mandela, and what he said after apartheid. If the pain has often been unbearable, and the revelation shocking to all of us, it is because they indeed bring us the beginnings of a common understanding of what happened and a steady restoration of this nation's humanity. So before we part, let us again state clearly for all to hear. The Confederacy was on the wrong side of history and humanity. It sought to tear apart our nation and subjugate our fellow Americans to slavery. This is a history we should never forget, and one that we should never, ever again put on a pedestal to be revered. As a community, we must recognize the significance of removing New Orleans Confederate monuments. It is our acknowledgement that now is the time to take stock of and then move past a painful part of our history. Anything less would render generations of courageous struggle and soul searching a truly lost cause. Anything less would fall short of the immortal words of our greatest president, Abraham Lincoln, who with an open heart and a clarity of purpose calls on us today across the ages to unite as one people when he said, with malice towards none, with charity for all, with firmness in right as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive on to finish the work that we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. God bless you all. God bless you all. And it's a God bless the United States of America.
Oh, wow. My God.
That's heresy in the South. That's heresy in the South.
Parts of the South.
Well,
I pray for his life.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's no joke. It's no joke. Yes.
I think this speech belongs with maybe 6 speeches in our history, including I have between the Gettysburg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I sent it, and I said this is a great moment in history. This is a turning point. This is a wow. So
It was so funny when he said the Confederacy lost the war. I said, no one had ever heard that before. And that's kind of the way it's treated. Like it's a fact that nobody will say out loud.
Yeah.
That's true. They lost. But it was shocking to hear somebody say it aloud.
Right from the start of the speech, he said that.
well,
Is there one more?
Yeah.
I've got more.
Here. There's more. Yes.
I came to this class to become an ally. You're coming to an ally. That's what an ally looks
That's what an ally looks like. Yeah. But
like. Shame. Just out there talking. He's talking to.
right.
He's not talking to black people. He's talking to white people.
He's talking to white people.
He's talking to the soul.
Yeah.
That's what he's talking to.
Yeah.
He's talking to history.
Well, and the thing is that you have to be willing to look at it.
Exactly.
That's the thing, is that you have to be willing to look at it. And we have so sanitized everything, we're not looking at it. Okay. So I want you to do the other link now, Nate, on there.
Is it a video?
No, it's a written document. Okay, and it's referred to as the cornerstone speech because it is the cornerstone upon which the Confederacy was built. It was delivered on March 21st, 1861. This was right before the Civil War in Savannah, Georgia. My niece is in Savannah as we speak, as senior in college there. And it basically talks about, in the beginning, what's going to happen with this new Constitution and how it's going to be set up, very much like what we've looked at in terms of the U.S. Constitution. The things that they want to improve upon, the things that they want to change. But this is the part where the mayor is referencing. If you go down to should be paragraph 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay.
What does it start with?
I am looking.
Number change.
Oh, shoot. This thing photocopied them wrong. Ugh. Okay, that's why it's so crazy. All right, so the wrong pages are on back of the wrong pages. I'm trying to save some paper, but you're gonna have to look down at the bottom. So you have bottom page number 1 there, but page number 2 is towards the very back. It's second to the last page. Are you with me? If you look at the bottom on the far left is the page number. It says 2-6.
Mine are in order.
Look to the second to the last page. Do you see it now?
Do I see it now?
Yes. Are you there?
What does it say?
What does it say? What?
The paragraph.
Okay. Well, yeah. You're going to start in it starts with but not to be tenuous. Okay. And what does it mean to be tenuous? When you're tenuous about something. You're not sure. If something's tenuous, it's kind of not solid. Okay? And he's saying, but not to be tenuous. Like, let me make this absolutely perfectly clear. Oh, tedious. I'm sorry. Not to be tedious in enumerating, but he's saying, you know, I'm making this clear. I'm going to say this again so that it is perfectly clear. Okay. It says not to be tedious in enumerating the numerous changes for the better. Allow me to allude to one other, though last, not least. Okay, so up until now, he's talked about all the different slight changes that they want to make to their constitution. The new constitution has put at rest forever all the agitating questions relating to a peculiar institution, African slavery, as it exists amongst us, the proper status of the Negro in our form of civilization. This was the immediate cause of the late rupture and present revolution. Jefferson, in his forecast, he's talking about in the forecast at the
Jefferson Davis.
in the beginning,
Right.
in the beginning of the Constitution, and the beginning of the Declaration of Thomas Jefferson. So he said, so he's saying like 100 years ago, Thomas Jefferson forecasted this, 90 years ago. Jefferson in his forecast had anticipated this as the quote unquote rock upon which the old Union would split. He was right. What was conjecture with him is now a realized fact. But whether he fully comprehended the truth upon which that rock stands, or on which that rock stood and stands, may be doubted. The prevailing ideas entertained by him and most of the leading statesmen at the time of the formation of the old Constitution were that the enslavement of the African was in violation of the laws of nature, that it was wrong in principle, socially, morally, and politically. It was an evil that they knew not well how to deal with. But the general opinion of the men of that day was, somehow or another, in the order of providence, the institution would be evanescent and pass away. Evanescent means to kind of erode, to be, or to peel away. Would be evanescent and pass away. This idea, though not incorporated in the Constitution, was the prevailing idea at the time. The Constitution, it is true, secured every essential guarantee to be secured. The Constitution, it is true, secured every essential guarantee to the institution while it should last, and hence no argument can be justly argued against the constitutional guarantees this secured because of the common sentiment of the day. Those ideas, however, were fundamentally wrong. They rested upon the assumption of the equality of races. This was an error. It was a sandy foundation, and the government built upon it fell when the storm came and the wind blew. Okay?
Yeah.
This is in reference to the Bible passage that appears in the Sermon on the Mount at the end, when Jesus says, "He who hears these words of mine and does something with them is likened to the wise man who builds his house upon the rock. And when the winds and the rains come, the house still stands. But he who hears these words and doesn't do anything with it is likened to the foolish man who builds his house upon the sand. And when the winds and the rain come, great is the fall of the house." So this has been a metaphor in Christian culture all along about building on the rock or building on the sand. And he's saying that they're building upon the idea that there really might be equality of the nations. We're not going to write it into the Constitution, but this prevailing idea basically is that we have to accept this now, or we're not going to be able to rebel together against England. But we're willing to institutionalize this because we know one day this is going to fail. It's kind of like Clinton setting up Don't Ask, Don't Tell, or the Defense of Marriage Act. It's like he knew it was going to fall. He did what was politically expedient in the day, but he turns around now and even says, "I know we were wrong. We did what we have to do," but he was counting on it falling. Okay. Now they're saying these guys were 100% wrong. Our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite idea. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery subordination to the superior race is his natural and normal condition. This, our new government, is the first in the history of the world based upon this great physical, philosophical, and moral truth. Let's let that sink in for a moment. Determined to be the first nation built upon that truth. Yes, that Confederate war lost, but this idea didn't die. No war can end this idea. And we'll keep reading here, but just remember, this wasn't just the Confederacy, that only 6 years before that, the Supreme Court ratified this. In a 7-2 vote in the Dred Scott decision, that Africans were never meant to be citizens, couldn't be citizens. That it was 900 pages, and it said they went through every state and every law, and it was clear that they were never meant to be fully entitled as everybody else. So the Confederacy may have wanted to build a new nation on that, but they weren't alone. Okay, I don't want you to think like they were the United States Supreme Court in a 7, and I've never even heard of the 7-2 decision on anything. I mean, that's extraordinary. Like upheld it. So let us go on. It says, this truth has been slow in the process of its development, like all other truths in the various departments of science. It has been so even amongst us. Many who hear me, perhaps, can recollect well that this truth was not generally admitted, even within their day. The errors of the past generation still clung to many as late as 20 years ago. Those at the North who still cling to these errors with a zeal above knowledge, we justly denominate fanatics. All fanaticism springs from an aberration of the mind, from a defect in reasoning. It is a species of insanity. One of the most striking characteristics of insanity in many instances is forming correct conclusions from fancied or erroneous premises. So with the anti-slavery fanatics. Their conclusions are right if their premises were. They assume that the Negro is equal and hence conclude that he is entitled to equal privileges and rights with the white man. If their premises were correct, their conclusions would be logical and just. But their premises being wrong, their whole argument fails. I recollect once of having heard a gentleman from one of the northern states of great power and ability announce in the House of Representatives with imposing effect that we of the South would be compelled ultimately to yield upon this subject of, and 3 is on the other side, to yield upon this subject of slavery, that it was impossible to war successfully against a principle in politics as it was in physics or mathematics, that the principle would ultimately prevail, that we, in maintaining slavery as it exists with us, were warring against a principle founded in nature, the principle of the equality of men. The reply that I made to him was that upon his own grounds, we should ultimately succeed, and that he and his associates in his crusade against our institutions would ultimately fail. The truth announced that it would be impossible to war successfully against a principle in politics, as it was in mathematics and physics, I admitted, but told him that it was he and those acting with him who were warring against a principle. They were attempting to make things equal, which the Creator had made unequal. In the conflict thus far, success has been on our side, complete throughout the length and breadth of the Confederate States. It is upon this, as I have stated, our social fabric is firmly planted. And I cannot permit myself to doubt the ultimate success of a full recognition of this principle throughout the civilized and enlightened world. And then he goes on about this and how many governments have been founded upon the principle of subordination and serfdom of certain classes of the same race. Were they in violation of nature? Our system commits no such violation of nature's laws. With us, all of the white race, however low, however high or low, rich or poor, are equal in the eye of the law. Not so with the Negro. Subordination is his place. This is in the middle. He by nature or by the curse against Canaan, this was a biblical thing, is fitted for that condition which he occupies in our system. The architect in the construction of buildings, lays the foundations with the proper material, the granite. Then comes the brick or the marble. The substratum of our society is made by the material fitted by nature for it. And by experience, we know that it is best, not only for the superior, but for the inferior race, that it should be so. It is indeed in conformity with the ordinance of the Creator. It is not for us to inquire about the wisdom of his ordinance or to question them. For his own purposes, he has made one race to differ from another, as he has made one star to differ from another star in glory. The great objectives of humanity are best obtained where there is conformity to his laws and decrees, in the formation of government as well as in all things else. Our confederacy is founded upon principles in strict conformity with these laws. This stone, which will be rejected by the first builders, is become the chief of the corner, the real cornerstone in our new edifice. I have been asked, what of the future? It has been apprehended by some that we would have arrayed against the civilized world. I care not who or how many may be against us. We should stand upon the eternal principles of truth, as if we are true to ourselves and the principles for which we contend, we are obliged to and must triumph. Thousands of people who began to understand these truths are not yet completely out of the shell. They do not see them in their length and breadth. We hear much of the civilization and Christianization of the barbarous tribes of Africa. In my judgment, those ends will never be obtained, but by first teaching them the lesson taught to Adam, that in the sweat of his brow he shall eat his bread, and teaching them to work and feed and clothe themselves. And then he goes on and on. I skipped the first part of that paragraph. Take a breath.
She likes quoting the Bible.
Put the cameras back on.
Yeah, using the Bible for his curse of Canaan.
Yes.
This is so amazing at looking at our own formation of our own ego, because it's like what I hear and feel is that talking about the realization of ultimate truth, something that came from the Creator that is changeless. It's, it's like how you talk about the real, birthless, deathless, and to look at his and see the contortion.
Yes.
That how I take everything back to myself, turn everything into the lie, and completely justified as the highest enlightened order.
Yes. This is a lot to take in. Okay. So, I'm going to let you breathe on this a minute, and we'll come back next week to even deeper discussions about it. This is a spiritual crisis. What I'm wanting us to see here is that politics is just one way that it expresses itself. But it is a spiritual crisis. You can separate church and state in terms of institutions, but you can never separate politics and religion. You can't do that. You can't separate politics and religion, because every politic is based upon a worldview of what the natural order of things are. And that's the job of religion. The job of religion is to tell us what is natural, like how things come to be. They are to explain to us the divine and our relationship to the divine, and then everything comes out of that, which is why we are never going to solve this stuff at the ballot box. This isn't about ballot box. until there is a deep-seated revolution in our most fundamental spiritual values, we're not going to get anywhere. This is part of the reason why this concept that we have about oneness is so revolutionary and heretical. Because our nation hasn't been built on it. And we might go, oh, yeah, okay, you know, sure, there's oneness. No. No. And this stuff that's so shocking to most people in the room is the reality, with which non-white people have been living. And how difficult it is when it's denied. When the well-meaning white people say, I don't see color, or everything's equal, or everything, it's maddening. It's just maddening, because how are we ever going to get beyond it if we can't see it and name it? And I hope you understand now why I keep saying that our problem is supremacy. The problem is not oppression. We keep talking about racism and whatnot as though it's just a form of discrimination, but for what purpose? It's to uplift something else. And until we can kind of like name the beast and say why it is not so. And I'm going to say one more thing here before I turn it over to you. Remember when we looked at the 13th Amendment, which supposedly ends slavery? It doesn't end slavery. It says that there shall not be slavery or forced involuntary servitude except as a condition for punishment by a crime. So part of the way we keep this mentality going, this isn't just about, quote unquote, the Negro. It's about our right, supremacist right, to put certain people in servitude for whatever reason. If not by natural laws of God, it's because they deserve it from their criminal activity. And then we seek to criminalize more and more stuff, whether it's people's sexuality, whether it's their immigration status, whether it's their drug addiction. I mean, we can go on and on and on to wanting to put people into that criminal status, which is, for all intents and purposes, and I'm using the word deliberately, making them a nigger. Like, as long as we have that category that exists, where there's some people who are so inferior that they deserve to be subjugated, it's always going to be somebody. So I want us to pay attention to the construct itself, not like just demonize white people. It isn't just about white. It's this construct of supremacy, superiority, and that there's somebody, anybody, that God has made less than or that doesn't deserve to be treated the same because of whatever. That mental construct is still here. It's still here. And this is the ugly truth that nobody wants to take a look at. It's right here.
So what part was omitted from the speech?
Yeah, it's and in the email that you got, it'll say exactly where it was. It was the point when he started naming names. When he started saying that Stevens and this person and that person in the original documents, it was the part where he's quoted from here, that the Confederacy's cornerstone was to be that Black people were not equal to white people, and that white people were inherently superior, and that this was going to be the first nation built upon that truth. Built upon it. And can you see how it's Confederate war and no Confederate war? Can you see how this is still playing out? That this is still like alive, well, and kicking.
Just one more question about the clan. Then the clan probably feels like they are the enforcers of this idea, that they have religious, you know,
Yes.
God gives, I mean, God put them on this earth to do what they're doing because they totally are in alignment with that.
Oh, yes. Yes. So what they feel, so people who adhere to this feel victimized by equality. By equality. They feel victimized by diversity. They feel like they are being forced against natural laws to have to subjugate themselves to this. So can you imagine how outrageous it was to have a president who's half African? I mean, if that's not in their mind, like progressive people feel like somehow or another there was a coup and like the nation just got taken over, well, that's how they felt. Like, how in the world could anybody let this happen? You got a half monkey running the show. How infuriating, like how insulting. You know, we got to get back to the natural order of things. We got to get back to the natural order of things. So everybody's fighting in their minds the righteous fight. And even they admit, the righteous fight, even they admit that should all of those other people who believed in equality of the races been right in that premise, then the direction in which they were trying to make the nation, take the nation would make sense. But they were wrong. So what we're up against now isn't really red versus blue. It's really not. What we're up against now is really a fundamental idea about what is the nature of God. And this is the last hurrah. What we're going through now is the last hurrah. Because I am telling you, the world is tired of the white races walking around acting like they are superior to everybody else. They're tired. I'm not just talking about African Americans in the South. I'm saying the Japanese are tired, the Chinese are tired, the Arabs are tired. It's like everybody is really, really tired of this, you know, right now. And New Orleans and America aside, for our survival in the global world, for us to stop World War III, I mean, really, for us to put some preservation of some sanity, there's some real checking our egos at the door that are going to happen here. Because we aren't naming it white supremacy. We've rebranded it as nationalism, as American supremacy. You hear white people saying, now, well, I'm not white, I'm just American. I'm not white, I'm just a human being. I'm not, But that same kind of God bless us and we're the leaders of the free world and, you know, we're the ones that are supposed to lead. And that consciousness is still so pervasive. And the fact that we got to learn to play nice and be global citizens with everybody else. And we got to share. This is big news now. Nick, were you wanting to say something?
Yes,
And then
Barbara,
Russell.
going back a bit,
Okay.
Barbara had a question. Where did they get the idea that God created inequality?
Where did they get the idea that God created inequality? You know, there's some stories in the Bible that are back in the early Hebrew text, which are stories about different tribes and things that have happened to different tribes. And there was one tribe that existed in the land of Canaan that supposedly was cursed. And they were a darker tribe. Their skin complexion was darker. But here's the thing about this, is that all of that is fallacious. God did not create different tribes. Anthropologically speaking, that's not true. We can tell where the origins of human civilization started in Africa. 75% of human history was on the continent of Africa. And it was only as these tribes started to migrate around the world that they then developed these different physical characteristics that are tied to geography. There are not different races. From a DNA standpoint, it doesn't exist. God didn't create like different, you know, like you've got Chihuahuas and St. Bernards. You know, it's not like that amongst people. You can interchange body parts, blood, bone marrow. What we say is race only accounts for less than 1,000th of 1% of our DNA. And all of it is geographic adaptation. It's it. There's not a single thing that doesn't account for it. You're in colder countries, you don't need all that melanoma. You hot, you need curly hair. You don't find people in Africa with fur coats attached to them. You're in Russia, you need hair. In Africa, you don't. Everything, the eyes, the nose, the hair, all of those have become adaptations to the environment. And even now, to speak of race, we have to talk about geographic location. To still talk about it. African American or the Asians or the this or that, because when you're in these different geographies, your physicality needs to be a certain kind of way. But there is no scientific proof whatsoever that there were different species of human beings that were created. That's not true. It's just not true. It's not true. And quiet is kept, and I'm not saying this to be mean or anything like that, but white people were amongst the latest. They were newer in the human chain. And in terms of their culture and evolution and civilization, they were not the ancient culture. The ancient cultures that had mathematics and science and all the rest of that, they were the Egyptians. You know, they were the Chinese. There were a lot of these other cultures that they're later. It's like rewriting. They're later to the game, and did not make all of those early contributions. They didn't. It just, and I'm not saying this as a criticism. I got white blood in me. It's just a historical fact. They were later. They were later, and they extrapolated and took the gold, took the, you know, took the goods and all the way, and put them in their countries, or the people, or the whatever. This mass exportation that we did all over the place. It rewrites the history that we've told ourselves, but it's okay. It doesn't make anybody like better or less than that. It's just the way that it's been. That's all. Yes. And we'll start to close out. Yes, ma'am.
So this is very hard on the heart.
Yes, I'm sure.
I'm starting to see for the first time that when Mayor Landrieu said, Confederacy lost the Civil War, we need to start saying things like that. Jesus was a Jewish, dark-skinned Eastern man.
Yes.
We need to start saying some of these and holding them. God loves all God's creatures. Basic things, and
Yes.
envision them loudly, not big philosophical, distant things. And I'm also starting to see for the first time how intellect could take on, I don't mean Christianity at all, because Christianity in my view, took a wrong turn a long time ago. Use the words of Jesus, not Christianity, the words of Jesus. Because if you back up in the Sermon on the Mount that he used the end of, just 4 or 5 paragraphs, it completely denies what he said.
Exactly.
But those are the things I don't think we're saying with any courage. Just like he said, the South lost the Civil War. And I think intellect could be at the forefront of just telling simple truths, not big truths. Simple in that they're basic.
Yes. You are absolutely 100% correct. And that's what this whole training program that we've been doing here has been based upon. Is a new narrative. Okay, a new narrative. A new narrative that is inclusive, but to stick, it's going to take the people who have been in privileged positions to basically use that privilege to create the new narrative. And you know, if you go back to the beginning, you're reinforcing. Absolutely. So we don't need to justify the people who are here without their papers. It's time for us to start referring to them, our undocumented citizens, okay? But that they are just as worthy and just as good as any of the rest of us. That we have to say it.
Right.
We can't just keep looking at the people who are discriminated against and trying to focus on them. Somehow we have to characterize this with that we are equal, they're equal to us. That's different just than they deserve, but that we're not better than they are. We're not, like, I don't want to, yes, we need to stand by the Muslims, but what's more important is for us to say that Christianity is not superior. That Christians don't have a right to dominate the world, America, or public discourse. Even if you're a Christian to say that. See, we don't have that right that we must share. And the other religions are just as legitimate as ours. And that's going to be heresy. Remember we talked before about how for some of us the idea of diversity is evolution, and for others it's dissolution. But yes, this is where the rubber hits the road, and I know this is hard. I don't know whether it's harder for a white person to hear it or a black person. I don't know.
So,
It's pretty damn hard. It's pretty damn hard. And to read that shit, but I have to, just to face it, confront it, so we can all move on. You want to share that at the end?
Yes.
Yeah. Beverly.
Well, even though it's hard, and I feel like I need to read this 5 times to really get what it's saying, finally, it's like it makes sense why those people down there, so many of them really believe they're right, because they're buying these premises. And if you buy those premises, like this guy says, it makes logical sense.
Yeah.
And apparently this has been part of what's been taught, officially or unofficially, for many I think it went back even farther to when race became a concept.
Yes, definitely.
And the idea that, oh, you can genetically show that there's these races, and Caucasian is the top and black is at the bottom.
But all I'm saying is that let's not get stuck on thinking this is the South. This isn't
true.
This isn't just the South. California just happened to be the first ones to get rid of the laws against interracial marriage and the first one to get rid of the laws against integrated schools. But that wasn't until 1948.
Thank you. I shouldn't be.
That wasn't until, my parents were already married. It wasn't all that long ago, is all I'm saying, is that this stuff has been institutionalized everywhere. It's been institutionalized everywhere, and we need to stop just talking about the South. I showed this because it shows how deeply rooted and gives the context for why he's doing that and what's really at stake. And now there's a public thing that's happening, and want to empower all of us to be able to hold the space and consciousness for what's trying to unfold. I think it's beautiful. As hard as it is, I am so grateful. Do you want to share that?
I do. I belonged to a group a long time ago, like 30 years ago, and this was presented as the Shema of the New Age. If thine eye be single, thy whole body will be full of light. Hear, O sons of light, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. He makes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and his rain to fall on the just and the unjust. Eliminate all hate. Resist not evil. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy soul, with all thy mind, with all thy heart, and with all thy strength. And thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. This is all from Jesus. Inscribe these commandments in the center of thy forehead. Write them with thy hand and put them over thy door, so all that pass over may know that you are free and may be blessed. Remember them when you arise in the morning to live the day. Remember when you sit down to meditate. Remember when you go to sleep at night. Teach them to your children, that they may walk the path of life. For God is the God of the living.
It's beautiful. And Jesus was quoting Hebrew scripture. It's like they're quoting him, but he's also quoting.
Jesus was.
He's also quoting. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
It is.
That's really, really gorgeous.
And it's been hanging on my wall, and I haven't been paying any attention to it.
Well, good. You'll pay attention to it now. Let it bless you.
I am paying attention to it every day.
Yes.
Remember it in the morning.
Yeah, I'd like to take a photo of that. So yes, Radha.
Are we at the end?
Yes, of today.
Okay. Do I have time to say something?
Go ahead.
I have a personal confusion.
Okay.
My personal confusion is that I take all this and I read it and I bring it right back to how I do it.
Mhm.
And I feel like maybe in the class,
Mhm.
I mean, I just do that.
Mhm.
Maybe in the class, I'm trying to understand my question, which I'm trying to understand. My question is, when I question myself,
Mhm.
am I missing something that I should be going out into instead of changing it in here?
You're not missing it. You just can't do the outer change until it really sits within. To see it, to recognize it, and forgive it. To forgive it so that you're not on the triangle whenever you are doing the outer work.
So it's not, because I question, is it a mistake that it goes right back when I read this.
No.
And I've just kind of the awareness.
Mm.
This is how it works. This is how we play this whole God.
Yes.
This, okay.
Exactly. And when you understand that, then we don't have to point fingers so much. It's like, okay, this is the way the mind works. This is the way the ego works.
Yes.
This is the way the constructs work.
Yes.
Then we can have some compassion. But most of all, like the air out there, the air clears things. You have the smoke in the air. Well, that's how our consciousness does. We're purifying the air, so to speak, that's gotten all cluttered up with a lot of pollution. Okay, and we do have to end now. A lot of pollution, but we're bringing it in first now to be able to see, and then stuff will start making more sense to you about what you need to say and what you need to do, and the opportunities will come your way for the conversations that you need to have and the things that you need to pray for. But it'll just make stuff make more sense as to what the world is going on. And I know this is hard. I know what we looked at is like really, really hard. And you probably need to look at it a couple of times yet. And I want to suggest that everybody do some self-care. Because I recognize in this class, I'm not giving you the nurturing self-care. I recognize that, okay? But do whatever you got to do. Take a walk, write, journal, share it with people, whatever you have to do, okay? Do it. Don't let it just fester, right? So let's stand.
Thanks, Rev.
Thank you. And I appreciate all the stuff in the baskets and people putting stuff online in the PayPal. And you see how important our theme song is. Yes? I give myself a permission to be all I can be. I give myself a permission to live passionate and free. I give myself permission to be all I can be. I give myself permission to live passionate and free. Amen, amen. Let us take this consciousness and
Multiply it.
multiply it. All right, everybody.